Good day, class. Welcome to our class. This is Teacher Grace, and for today's lesson, we are going to talk about the short story of The Ninny by Anton Chekhov. But before diving through with the story, I prepared some related questions that would help us get some ideas of what is the story that we are going to talk about. So, I will be throwing you some questions, and you know the drill. Once you want to say your answer, you may unmute your mic and mention your last name so that your teacher will be aware of who is speaking. Okay? So, anyone from our class who has tried working or even working up to now? Anybody? Raise your hand if you have a job. Okay, I see Miss Ensil have muted herself, which means she have tried working. Okay, let me ask you this question number 2, Miss Ensil. How many of you would stand up for yourself if you didn't think that you were being paid fairly?
Yes, ma'am. So we work hard for what we earn as employees. So if I'm not paid fairly, every one of us has the right to stand up for what is right. So because I work in time, I must be appropriately compensated.
Very well said, Miss Ensil. Definitely, if we are working, so we ought to be paid fairly. Just for example, if in my situation, I work as a teacher and our salaries were not given in time or even our salaries were deducted highly. So of course, we have the right to raise our concern or even complain, right? Okay, now for the third question. Would you willingly ask somebody for more money than they are already giving you? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right, Miss Inlajusta. Your answer?
Yes, because in according to in verse Matthew 7, chapter 7, verse 12, and everything do to others what you have then do to you. So, ito siya ang konti.
All right, so I got your point. Your main point is that you don't want if you don't want others to do something wrong for you, then don't get wrong for others. So which means if you don't want na lulukuhin ka ng may-ari, ng amo mo rather, then don't deceive them as well. And for the last question, how do you think women were treated in the late 19th century?
Inausta, miss.
Okay, yes, Miss Inlajusta.
So, the women in 19th century were treated very lowly because they were being discriminated and not giving privilege study because they believe that women's major role is stay at home and focus household chores. But now, nowadays, both men and women can treat it fairly.
Yes, very well. Thank you so much for your answers, everyone. So I could really say that you have been reading our story in advance, just as what I mentioned in our group chat. Okay, so now let us now bound or share or begin by sharing to you the background of the story. So, are you ready, everyone? Leave a thumbs up when you're ready. Give a thumbs up, everyone. I see Miss Lesley and Miss Ensil are very much excited to hear the story. Okay, so The Ninny by Anton Chekhov revolves around the idea of how women were inferior to men during the older ages, which is why I asked you the number 4 questions a moment ago. When a governess that was very timid and had no power stood there and watched as how the master of the house slowly cheated her of her earnings. As master of the house decreased the money for false charges, the governess was not able to do anything until the end, where she had been only given an eighth of her earnings. All she was able to say was mercy. In the end, the master was furious that she was not able to stand up for herself, that he had called her a ninny. And it seemed he was playing a cruel trick on her, and he paid her the rightful earning of 80 rubles in the end of the story. So historically, the story takes place in postmodern Russia, which seemingly around the time of the abolition of serfdom and legal emancipation of peasants in their society. This was a time as well where women's rights, especially, were suppressed and getting by was not easy for the lower class of citizens. And lastly, the short story The Ninny is a representation for the revolutionary struggle for peasants during her time period, and her employer, the wealthy man, represents how the privileged still had the power to abuse their control over them. So this kind of situation is kind of relatable to our situation nowadays in our country, right? So now let's go to the definition of terms that are mentioned in the story. So when we say ninny, this means a foolish. Okay, sorry for that. Okay, for the definition of terms, when we say ninny, this means a foolish person. And when we say governess, this means a woman employed to teach children in a private household. So this governess nowadays can be relatable to like tutor in our modern world. And for the rubles, this is a Russian currency. And lastly, we have the term chambermaid, which means they are the maid who cleans the bedrooms and the bathrooms. So, as important as the meaning of the story itself, it's also essential for us to get to know who the author is. So, moving on, we have here the author of the short story, who is Anton Chekhov. So, Miss, why is it important for us to know the author of the story? So, of course, when we got the chance to know a certain person, then definitely we could understand why the person is making or creating that story. Okay, everyone, did you get it? Okay, yeah, so I love your energy here today. Okay, so we have here Anton Chekhov, who was born in January 29, 1860 in Taganrog, Russia. His father was named Pavel, was a grocer with frequent money troubles, and his mother, Yevgenia, shared her love of storytelling with Chekhov and his 5 siblings. So from here, we could say that Chekhov got a habit of making stories from her mother. Okay, and Chekhov also, he supported his family with his freelance writing, producing hundreds of short comic pieces under a pen name for local magazines, and in his early writing career during the mid-1880s. So if you have been wondering, why is it that people or the writer before are usually using pen names? Diba? If you have been watching the recent movie Bridgerton, so there is a story or a part wherein the one who is always producing news hid herself. He did not identify herself. So why is it important? This is very important because people, or this is also to prevent giving false accusations or even shall we say kanaganing buhatan ng fake news in our layman's term. Okay, everyone? So yes. And lastly, he practiced as a physician and began to publish serious works of fiction under his own name. So nag-sideline din po siya. And like most of his early works, it showed the influence of the major Russian realists of the 19th century, such as Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky. Sorry for that. Okay, when we say Leo Tolstoy is famous for the story The Prince. Are you familiar with that, guys? Oh, I see. Miss Juvelyn nodded her head, which means yes. And in addition, he is also a renowned Russian author and a physician and a playwright. And he is recognized as a master of the modern short story and drama, and his works are often ambiguous, sometimes humorous, and explore how ordinary events can carry out a deeper significance. So overall, the body of work he produced has influenced some of the most important artists in history. And that is the short biography for our author. Now, let us go to the story itself. Now, let me read the entire story, and please listen carefully. Because after I read, I'll be throwing some questions at the end of our discussion. So are you guys ready? Are you guys ready? Okay, a thumbs up for Miss Ensil, which means she's excited. Okay, we have here The Ninny by Anton Chekhov. Just a few days ago, I invited Yulia Vasilyevna, the governess of my children to come to my study. I wanted to settle my account with her. Sit down, Yulia Vasilyevna, I said to her. Let's get our account settled. I'm sure you need some money, but you keep standing on ceremony and never ask for it. Let me see. We agreed to give you 30 rubles a month, didn't we? 40. No, 30. I made a note of it. I always pay the governess 30. Now let me see. You have been with us for 2 months. 2 months and 5 days. 2 months exactly. I made a note of it. So you have 60 rubles coming to you. Subtract 9 Sundays. You know you didn't tutor Kolya on Sundays. You just go out for a walk and then the 3 holidays. Yulia Vasilyevna blushed and picked at the trimmings of her dress, but said not a word. 3 holidays. So we take off 12 rubles. Kolya was sick for 4 days. Those days, you didn't look after him. You looked after Vanya. Only Vanya. Then there were the 3 days you had toothache when my wife gave you permission to stay away from the children after dinner. 12 and 7 makes 19. Subtract. That leaves 41 rubles, correct? Yulia Vasilyevna's left eye reddened and filled with tears. Her chin trembled. She began to cough nervously, blew her nose, and said nothing. Then around New Year's Day, you broke a cup and a saucer. Subtract 2 rubles. The cup cost more than that. It was an heirloom. But we won't bother about that. We're the ones who pay. Another matter, due to your carelessness, Kolya climbed a tree and tore his coat. Subtract 10. Also, due to your carelessness, the chambermaid ran off with Vanya's boots. You ought to have kept your eyes open. You got a good salary, so we docked off 5 more. On the 10th of January, you took 10 rubles from me. I didn't, Yulia Vasilyevna whispered, but I made a note of it. Well, yes, perhaps. From 4 to 1, we take 27. That leaves 14. Her eyes filled with tears, and her thin, pretty little nose was shining with perspiration. Poor little child, I only took money once, she said in a trembling voice. I took 3 rubles from your wife, never anything more. Did you know? You see, I never made a note of it. Take 3 from 14, that leaves 11. Here's your money, my dear. 3, 3, 3, 1, and 1. Take it, my dear. I gave her the 11 rubles. With trembling fingers, she took them and slipped them into her pocket. Mercy, she whispered. I jumped up and began pacing up and down the room. I was in a furious temper. Why did you say mercy? I asked. For the money. Don't you realize I've been cheating on you? I steal your money and all you can say is mercy? In my other places, they gave me nothing. They gave you nothing? Well, no wonder. I was playing a trick on you. A dirty trick. I'll give you your 80 rubles. They are all here in an envelope made out for you. Is it possible for anyone to be such a nitwit? Why didn't you protest? Why did you keep your mouth shut? Is it possible that there is anyone in this world who is so spineless? Why are such a ninny? She gave me a bitter little smile. On her face, I read the words, yes, it is possible. I apologize for having played this cruel trick on you. And to her great surprise, gave her the 80 rubles. And then she said mercy again several times, always timidly, and went out. I gaze after her, thinking how very easy it is in this world to be strong. So that is the end of the story about the Ninny. So how do you find it, guys? Did you understand the story? As a thumbs up from Miss Inlajusta, which means she definitely likes the story. So to further understand the story, now let us go to the setting of the story. So the setting of the story takes place in the late 19th century, the time when the author lived. And the story as well takes place in Russia, in the home of a wealthy family. And definitely the story starts with a man inviting the governess of his children, Yulia Vasilievna, into his study. So the story's events occur in the home of what seems to be a wealthy family, where a man is most powerful. We infer this with the names used for the characters in the story and the currency of rubles, which is the official currency used in Russia. This is significant to the story as the time and place tells us about how hard it was to earn money back then and how important it was to get paid. Now, for the characters of the story, for the main characters, we have the master, we have Yulia's employer. So we could say or we could describe as a very smart employer and a kind person because at first she played a trick on Yulia and she just wants Yulia to know how to fight herself and how to protect herself in this dirty trick. We have the second main character, the governess, who is identified as Yulia Vasilievna, and she is the governess of the employer's children, and she is described as a foolish person. She's timid and weak. She is working as a tutor, and on the other hand, Yulia's employer plays a trick on her by cheating her out of the money she earned, and Yulia Vasilievna knows that her employer is cheating her, but she did not complain. Her eyes are only filled with tears and does not speak up for herself, and she does not protest and defend herself. And at the end, she just took 11 rubles. And we also have the minor characters, the children, Kolya and Vanya, and the master's wife. Now, let us discuss more on the plot of the story. So for the exposition, the master invites the governess Yulia to his study with the purpose of discussing her salary. For the rising action of the story, the master not only starts to trick her with false information, but also starts telling her about her faults and commitments and other shortcomings, leading him to discounting her more than the half of her real wage. Now, let us see what happens in the climax. In the climax, the governess put up with everything she wanted to say to her master as she thought that at least it is a payment, since in her old jobs, she was not even paid. And for the following action of the story, Yulia accepts the master her master gave her, but then he told her that he had been cheating her and to see her reaction. And for the resolution of the story, as Yulia worked without complying, he gave her well-deserved salary, and he also told her that she should be less insecure and not let injustices be done against her. And for the conflict of the story, definitely the main conflict of the story is man versus man, where we could see between Yulia and her employer. Because her employer just wanted to teach her a lesson about standing up for herself by cheating her of money that she deserved. And for the features of the story, so we have here first the imagery. So, what are the use of these literary devices? Of course, in order for us to understand more of the story. So, imagery is visually descriptive or figurative language, meaning the use of words to paint a picture of what's going on in the scene to add some depth. Some examples in the story would be when the author described Yulia Vasilievna, left eye reddened and filled with tears and her chin trembled, she began to cough nervously, blew her nose and said nothing. So definitely, diba, we have already figured out how did Yulia looked like during the time. And throughout the story, there was some undeniable tension that was indirectly implied. So the author slowly described her as a young female named Yulia Vasilievna who was shy and spineless. Second feature of the story or the literary devices is that foreshadowing. So where in the story could we see foreshadowing? So in the part where I'm sure you need some money, but you keep standing on ceremony and never ask for it. This quote means that although Yulia needs the money she earned, she will act formally and professionally and without complaint wait until her boss decides to finally pay her. So this foreshadows how Yulia will act throughout the story and how she will react to the amount of stories she is giving. And for the second part, where we could see foreshadowing was used, is her eyes filled with tears and her thin, pretty little nose was shining with perspiration. Poor little child. So this quote shows us that the boss feels pity towards the governess and how even though she is physically affected from being robbed by her own boss, she does not protest. So it foreshadows that he may stop this horrible trick he was playing on her and give her the right amount of money that she earned because he feels bad for her. And next one is symbolism. So the use of symbols to represent ideas or qualities. And an example of symbolism in the Ninny is thinking how very easy it is in this world to be strong. Meaning, how easy it is to have power of someone if that person is spineless, meaning not self-grounded. Another symbol used in the story is the money, because this signifies how difficult it was for women to make money, as they were thought of as inferior to their male counterparts, which is why Lesley made mention a moments ago in our when we started our discussion that women before are treated inferiorly. So Julia's job was to raise only her employer's children while they went off to work to support his family, yet did not get paid at all her previous job. And the last feature could be personification. I mean, second to the last rather, is personification. So, for example, left eye reddened and filled with tears, diba? Her chin trembled. Would you believe that the chin will tremble? She began to cough nervously. Can you see her cough nervously acting when you're coughing? Or when you blew her nose. So, diba, can you blew your nose? And said nothing. So, this shows us that Yulia needed the money and she was sensitive and shy. So, this shows that Yulia was grateful for the money she had received because in other places, she did not get paid. And for the last part of the feature is the irony. Excuse me. For the irony, so when the employer said, you ought to have kept your eyes open. You get a good salary, said the employer. This is an example of irony because, excuse me, Yulia Vasilievna did not receive a good salary. Plus, he was stealing money from her by playing dirty tricks on her. Diba? It's very ironic because Yulia also said mercy. And this is an example of irony because the employer was not being honest with her in the first place. But in the other part, the own employer already have confined or give in to what is really the salary that Yulia Vasilievna deserved. And now for the final stage, for a challenging one for the question and answer. This is my question, and please unmute your mic and say your answer, okay? Okay. For the first question under the summary or definition, can you cite the summary that you've understood in the story, the Ninny? Yes, Miss Inlajusta, you're acknowledged.
So, the summary that I've understand in the Ninny is that Yulia is a foolish person and stupid or a weak, and she is working as a tutor. On the other hand, Yulia's employer plays a trick on her by cheating her out of her money she earned, and then he makes up a silly reason for not paying the right amount. The employer keeps on subtracting Yulia's salary because he wants to steal Yulia's money. And also, Yulia knows that her employer is cheating on her, but she didn't complain, and she doesn't protest and herself, then she just took the money. And lastly, but the end, at the end, her employer apologized to Yulia for having played a stupid trick, and her great surprise. And then his employer gave her 80 rubles, I think, and that's my thought, Miss.
All right, I could really see that you're listening, Miss Inlajusta. How about for the second question? Who is the protagonist in the story, the Ninny?
Ensil po, Miss.
Yes, Miss Ensil, acknowledge.
Yes, Yulia is the protagonist of the story, and I say so since she is the one who is mentioned throughout it. So that's all my opinion.
Yes, very well said. And now let's proceed to the level 2, the analysis or the interpretation. So first, what does the narrator do first in the Ninny to defraud Yulia of money owed to her?
Insil po, Miss.
Oh, yes, Miss Ensil.
For me, is the narrator or the boss claims they agreed on the 30 rubles amount, not a 40.
Yes, you're right. And for the second question, at the end of the story, how does the narrator surprise Yulia?
Can I, Miss?
Oh, yes, sure, Miss Inlajusta, go on.
At the end of the story, the chambermaid ran off with Vanya's boot due to her negligence. So she should have keep her eyes open, and she gets a good salary. But her boss her boss is deducting money from her salary for something she didn't do.
Yes, very well said, Miss Inlajusta. Now, we are now bound to our level 3 question under hypothesis and prediction. Do you think Yulia Vasilievna was a Ninny in your opinion? And why? Support your answer.
Yes, Miss, can I?
Oh, sure, Miss Ensil.
Yes. Yes. So, for me, in my own opinion, I do not believe that Yulia was a Ninny. So this narrative is that in a time when persons of lesser social status were unable to advocate for themselves. So they would be afraid of their boss since they were not only wealthy, but also the source of their money in order to keep her work and earn some compensation rather than none. So as she had in the past, Yulia timidly allowed her boss to deceive her and steal her rubles in the hopes of earning some money. So she did not complain for her other boss, and then until now he did not also complain. So that's all. Yes.
All right, a very much precise answer for that, Miss Ensil. For the second question, what may have done if the boss wasn't fooling and Yulia hadn't been herself?
Miss.
Oh, sure,
Can I,
Miss
Miss?
Inlajusta.
So, Yulia may have lost everything if she hasn't spoken out and been honest with herself. In this story, the author reminds us that if you are genuine and honest, not just to others but also to yourself, everything will work out in the end. It's all, Miss.
Yes. Okay, everyone. I thank you for your participation, but we still have the last level of questioning. Okay, for the final one, what are your thoughts on this story? So you have to relate this one with yourself.
Me again, Miss.
Oh, sure, Miss Inlajusta, a very participative student.
Same. So my thoughts on the story is I found it very interesting since it is demonstrated that not everyone is fortunate. Yulia has to go through a lot of acquire some things minor in the short story. I mean, and while the others can receive things instantly and without any problems. That's my thoughts.
Yes, a very much wonderful thought and brilliant idea you have, Miss Inlajusta. How about for the final question? What is the moral lesson of the story?
Insil, miss.
Okay, go ahead, Miss Ensil.
Yes. The moral lesson of the story is in a short story by Anton Chekhov. As a listener for me, it taught the importance of learning to speak out for yourself. The novel recounts the life of a governess named Yulia. So, as a listener, as what I have understand about the story, Yulia's former supervisors did not treat her fairly, and they know this because Yulia said, "As far as I recall, they gave me nothing in my possession." So when Yulia said this, I know she had not been treated fairly at her previous jobs. Near the end of the story, Yulia and the father of the children she cares for are discussing how many rubles will she receive, but her supervisor keeps deducting rubles from her compensation. So, and the boss replied, "Don't you realize I'm cheating on you and stealing on your money? So all you can say is mercy." So as a result, Yulia's boss has been teaching her the value of speaking up for herself. She teaches Yulia how to know how to speak up for herself. So, every person on the planet requires a voice, so which we must use to defend ourselves. But regardless of who you are, you must be able to defend yourself. No one in the world has authority to deny a human being. So his or her right to justice. So you run the risk of being manipulated if you don't speak up for yourself. So dapat yun nga mo speak up yun ka sa imong self, but in a right way. So dapat you have the right way to defend for yourself. And that's all for my opinion is. Thank you.
Oh my, Miss Ansel, your answer left me. Oh my God, I was very proud of you guys for, I could really see that you're listening, you're reading the story in advance and all. But before we end this story, so I would like to give a sort of generalization or like a sum of her story. So yes, for me, it is very much important for us to speak up for ourselves. Because when we got no chance to speak up for ourselves, there will be tendencies that people will be abusing us. So that is the reason why I always encourage everyone to learn how to speak up and fight for ourselves, especially if we know that we are on the right track. Okay, so thank you so much, our dear students, for your participation. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. Balucas here, who have been doing the recording of our presentation. Thank you for your time, sir, spent with us. And for my students, Miss Inlajusta and Miss Ensil, you did a good job, guys. I really love your knowledge, your insights, your participation, and your everything. And lastly, I apologize for my, as of now, if I'm not turning on my camera, because I don't know, when I turned my camera off and on a while ago, it was not anymore functioning. So I hope you will have a good day, the rest of you. You will have a good day ahead of you and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for everything and stay safe, everyone. Goodbye, class.
Goodbye, Miss, and thank you, Miss.
Yes, goodbye. Stay safe. Bye, Miss Ensil. Goodbye, sir.